Okay, there we go. All right, all right, all right. Atrocious. Hey, Keduka no day. We are six deep. Hey, everybody. If this one cuts, which has a habit of doing, and I know why, it's something that I need to fix on my end, and I should be have resolved by the end of the week. But if this one cuts off, I'll restart a second one if I'm not all the way done with my list. So first of all, I want to say what's up to everybody that's in here. Keduka ni nede. Keduka no de. I want to see some talking in the chat so I can know who's all here. I see there's five of you and only six likes. Today's topic is going to be how to discuss or how to include Africa in your work. I chose this particular topic because one of the things I really like when you guys do is when you send like works that you're working on, like, hey, I'm writing this story or maybe short story, long form story, whatever it is. Working on a screenplay, all these different things. Like that's really interesting. I'm honored that you guys send me those fairly regularly. And that's one of the things that like one of the goals I had for this particular channel is that if I can see the things that I discuss in people's art, that is success to me. That's 100% what I want to see because that's like phenomenal, and I think that's the proper home for these types of things. So as always, my name is Derek Alfadarangwa with the Medicine Shell. For those who are new, we are going to be discussing, of course, how to include Africa in your work. I have eight main points that I wanted to cover as far as the topic goes, because I feel like it's an extremely important one. The background is insane right now because we are in the process of moving. I'm finally reunited with my family after 3 months, maybe even four, of just running around doing different things and so on and so forth. So I've been very happy as far as this weekend goes and so forth. We are going to begin the discussion once we get 15 people in here. Once we have 15 people in here, we're going to go ahead and begin. I have eight main points that I wanted to cover as far as writing about Africa goes. Trying to look for my pen. Trying to look for my pen. So, if you want to support the channel, you can support at patreon.com/the medicine shell. If you are new, like I said, my name is Derek Ofadarunwa. I discuss Igbo cosmology, spirituality, and culture. So I pick different topics, or actually the patrons vote on different topics that I should do videos on. And then I do videos on different topics as far as African, or I'm not African, sorry, Igbo cosmology goes, or Udinani or Udinala Ndibo goes. I cover different topics. I go in depth. I'm a researcher. I refer to myself as a student teacher. So as I am learning, I'm teaching at the same time. So if you're interested in supporting the channel and getting exclusive content, you can join at patreon.com/the medicine shell. This Sunday, we're going to be having a live discussion for the patrons on Patreon, and it is going to be on spirituality and boundaries, right? We're going to be discussing how to set and release boundaries as far as interactions with people and even on a spiritual level, the art form that goes behind that and so forth. Our Odinani live chats on the Patreon are one of my favorite things of the month to do. We do it twice a month. Patrons also have access to my research library. If you happen to be like, if you're new and you're an author or you're thinking about writing about Africa, I have a very, very extensive library of books, articles, studies, firsthand accounts, journals, and so forth that pertain to Igbo spirituality, cosmology, and culture. I also go into other cultures. I have a folder for other cultures as well, such as the Yoruba culture. I go into hoodoo, Obe, Santeria, voodoo, different diasporic traditions. I also cover neighboring cultures in that same general region within Igbo land, and I'm expanding more to add things from the Congo River region. as I'm encountering more and more documents and books and things like that, people have actually sent me and offered me and things like that. So if you're interested, all that is available to patrons at patreon.com/slash the medicine shell. We are going to go ahead and begin the discussion once we get to 15 people in the room. Now I'm looking at the room. There are 11 people in here. There's only 9 thumbs up. So I'm waiting for the two of you who are slacking to hit thumbs up. If you're in the room, go ahead and hit thumbs up. It helps the channel tremendously. If becoming a patron is not a way that you can help the channel, hitting thumbs up is another one, right? And it means a lot as far as YouTube and its algorithm goes. And then, as far as myself, and I appreciate that. All right, we're at 11:11. Okay, perfect. So once we get to 15, we're going to begin the topic. The topic is how to include Africa in your work. For everybody, really, my background is insane. We are going to be turning this room into a studio for the medicine shell and Kedu and everything that I'm working on. But it's also, I'm going to share it with my son and my daughter once she's of age, of course. It's going to be a playroom. So we're trying, as you see here, my his basketball hoop is over here. I got a slide here, and I don't know where I'm going to put all these things because, yeah. But yeah, so we're going to be turning this into a studio, um, and so forth. Uh, those who are in the room, Kedukan no de, Kedukan no de. Once we get to 15 people in the room, we're going to go ahead and begin the discussion. The discussion is how to include Africa in your work. By the way, if you are any type of creative, be it a writer, an artist, a photographer, filmmaker, anything like that, and you're in the room, go ahead and let us know what you're working on. If you got a link that we should check out, go ahead and put it in there. Like I said, one of my favorite things about this journey that I'm on is encountering where you guys incorporate our ancestral creativity into your modern day contemporary creativity. So we are going to go ahead and begin the discussion when we get to 15. Um, like I said, we're going to begin. Yeah, I'm repeating myself. We're going to begin discussion once we get to 15 people. Once we get to 15, and if we are taking too long to get to that 15, I might lower my sights and go ahead and begin. So let's see if we can get to 15. Right now, we're at 10. If you know anybody who would be interested in this particular topic, go ahead and send them this link. Post this on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you find yourself, TikTok, and so forth. Once we get to 15, we'll begin the discussion. Discussion has 8 ways or 8 things you should know when you're incorporating Africa into your works. And I'm, of course, due to my own interest and what I'm passionate about, there's going to be a particular focus on spirituality, right? So I'm going to be focusing on spirituality. I'm also going to focus specifically on writing, though a lot of this can also be factored in for visual art. Of any form or spoken art of any form and so forth, be it music and that type of thing. So, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. Um, I'm going to go ahead and assume there's just not that many many writers in the world and so forth. So, we're going to go ahead and probably kick it off very soon. Let's see if we can get to 12. If we can get to 12, I'll go ahead and begin the discussion. Again, if you want to support the channel, support at patreon.com/slash the medicine shell. If you are working on a project of any sort and you need help with research, I work very closely with a lot of my patrons on different projects they're working on. So if you're already a patron and you're working on something and you need my help or you want me to answer a question, just reach out on Patreon. That's not an issue. As most people know, I have no problem answering questions of any sort. So go ahead and send them over if you have them. All right. Once we get to 12, we're going to go ahead and begin the discussion. The discussion is how to incorporate or how did I title it? How to write about Africa, right? How to add Africa into your creative work, how to incorporate maybe some of the things I discuss on this channel into your creative works, and so forth. Again, I chose this topic because people send me their works very often. Um, and this isn't like a critique, by the way. Anybody who sent me anything, this isn't a critique of what you've sent me. Don't think I'm specifically thinking about or talking about you or anything like that. For the most part, the people who have sent me things, you guys have been very spot on. And I know that the level of, like, let's call it research and passion to accuracy and telling a good story is all very evident there, right? So I've been lucky to, because if people were sending me like garbage over and over and over, I, I would stop responding after a while because of sending actually sending really good stories. One of the best stories I've ever read in my life was sent to me by a very early follower on Twitter, and I need to reach back out to her, but like I read this thing and it was like something else. It was phenomenal. I don't know if she got it published or she got it out there. I tried to link her to as many people that I could as far as publishing goes. And so I don't know if that went anywhere, but it was a short story and it was like one of the best things I read in my life. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin. So Ununile, as always, I'm going to begin with you, Audrey. Now, I recently moved to an Audrey-less state, so I'm going to just use my hands to do the ceremony. Okay? Okike keruwa, anyị ji ọjị na-ekele gị, ma anyị ji aka anyị na-ekele gị, anyị ji obi anyị na-ekele gị, anyị ji uche anyị na-ekele gị, ala wala, ala nne mmadụ na nne mmụọ, anyị na-ekele gị, ndị iche na-esoro anyị, anyị ji obi ọma na-ekele unu, ma ndị eke, ma ọ bụ ndị orie, ma ọ bụ ndị afọ, ma ndị nkwọ, ndị mbụ na ndị egede, ndị mmadụ na ndị mmụọ, ụmụ ụwa niile na ụmụ mmụọ, anyị ji obiọma na-ekele unu. Mana taa anyị ga n'otu ije, ji otu uche na-aga ya, otu ụkwụ, otu obi, otu anya na-afụ ụzọ Chineke kere ka anyị gaa. Ọ ga-adị nnọọ na eke na orie na afọ na nkwọ ise. All right. So as always, I usually like to break down what I say when I'm performing the opening when I do Iwaji. I gave acknowledgments to the Creator. I gave acknowledgments to the earth. I gave acknowledgments to our ancestors. In the Igbo tradition, for ancestors, to include all ancestors, you use the names Eke, Orie, Afo, and Nkwo. These are the 4 days of the week, and each of those days, whichever day you were born is your day, and it's one of your names. So it's a way of including your nameless those ancestors that cannot be named. It is very appropriate to use in a gathering where you, of course, don't know everybody's ancestors. And then, of course, for any person, because ultimately it's impossible to know all of your ancestors, right? So giving acknowledgments to them, gave acknowledgments to Ndimbu and Ndiegede, which are the first ancestors, our first ancestors, the people who brought humanity forward and the thing we call human culture and so forth. And then Ndimmadu and Ndimmo, people and spirit. I gave acknowledgments to everything. Now, when you're doing Iwaji, when you're beginning any type of ceremony in the Igbo tradition, you are giving acknowledgments, right? So you're acknowledging everybody that's relevant, everything that's relevant to the situation. So if we were in a gathering and there would be people, I might say people's specific names and greet them specifically, letting everybody know that we are together, we are one, and their presence is appreciated as we continue in communion. So from there, I said we're going to move as one on a single path, with one heart, one mind, and that kind of thing. And so that's how I typically begin the meetings for these lives, and so forth. So the topic is specifically for writers, but I'm going to be speaking about different types of art in general, right? I thought about 8 different things to consider when writing about Africa. I'm going to get this so I can get a marker so I can mark off what I'm saying, right? So 8 different things to consider when writing about Africa. Now, writing about Africa is always difficult for people because the level of, I guess, what we would call mainstream coverage is very low. Outside of the low mainstream coverage, a lot of what is said or known about Africa is very laced in propaganda, for lack of better terms. And that's actually one of the things I'm going to be addressing. It's very laced in propaganda. And it is a propaganda that typically exists in extremes.
Daddy, is your phone charged?
Hey, Namdi. Yeah, my phone's charged, but I want to keep it here, okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, when I'm done, we can do. Hey, my son, hey, Namdi, come say hi. So Namdi hasn't been in the live for a long time.
Hi.
Hey, what's going on? Okay, just wait for me out there, okay? I'll bring the thing in about an hour, okay?
Bring the what?
Or if you want to hang out here, that's fine too.
I'm gonna hang out here.
Okay, close that door, okay? Cool. So typically, when Africa is written about, there's a lot of what we would call propaganda, right? Propaganda being something that is put forward to create a reaction, specifically to create a reaction, right? So, and the propaganda typically exists in extremes. There's going to be your first line, which is extreme negative, and then there's going to be your second
My
line.
battery's on. My battery's 89.
Yes, Nandi, but I have to focus, okay? Cool. So there's going to be your second line, which is going to be extreme positive. So a lot of what you receive from Africa always exists, or like often exists in these polls, and it's very hard to figure out what's what in somewhere in the middle where reality typically lives. So oftentimes when you're doing your research on Africa, that is one of the things to be mindful of, or one of the things that you are incorporate, or like if you want to incorporate Africa into your story, that's one of the things to be mindful of. But I made a list of 8 things that you should be aware of when you're writing about any, let's say, the continent, African culture, African, or you're incorporating African spirituality into your work. So let me go ahead and begin with the list. Thing number one, have fun, right? Thing number one, have fun. Do not stress yourself. And like a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy for saying this. Do not stress yourself about accuracy. Do not stress yourself about what I guess we would now call gatekeepers. Do not stress yourself about doing it right, and so on and so forth. If you are if you're doing creative work exists to be creative. It is not the source of accuracy. You do not go to I guess literature to figure out what actually happened. Literature will show you the human experience within an event, if it is like historical fiction, things like that. It can show you the human experience within an event, right? But its job is not necessarily to be an account of history, right? Your creative work is not an account of history unless it is specifically not a creative work. You're not doing a creative work, you're accounting history, then you're a totally different discussion. But if you're doing a creative work, have fun. It's not about accuracy. The What a creative work does is it makes somebody take a look at something, and then if that thing resonates with them enough, they can then go look it up or research it or incorporate it how they want to incorporate it, right? So one of the examples I use often is the way Marvel uses the character of Thor, right? Marvel's depiction of Thor is very different from the accurate Nordic depiction of Thor, but Marvel, or yeah, Stan Lee, went ahead and had fun and created his own character loosely based off of this vibe called Thor. And if anybody is interested enough, they can then go to the historical text and see what Thor was actually like. So when it comes to Africa, do not forget to have fun. I think that when we get into, there's a lot of conversations with things like appropriation, right? And I understand how much of a threat that is, but it is an overestimated threat, right? Or misrepresenting cultures, right? Again, overestimated. If somebody creates a work of art and misrepresents my culture, the Igbo culture, right? Your little work of art is not going to change a 6,000-year-old culture. There's nothing it's going to do, right? So you're not that important, right? So it's fine. Just go ahead and have fun. If we want to figure out the actual happenings and the truth and so forth, we can most definitely, there are places to do that. Now, if you are writing for the sake of accuracy and you want to be a documentarian, I guess that maybe that's the word, or a historian, it's an entirely different art form, right? So that is thing number one, is to have fun. If you're having fun, the person reading has fun, and then from there, if that person is inspired to go do the historical thing or the accurate thing, then they can go ahead and do that. But don't be too obsessed or too caught up on the idea of misrepresenting a culture, um, that kind of thing, right? If you misrepresent them, a couple people get mad. Most people won't even know you did the thing, you wrote whatever you wrote. Most people won't care, right? There are authors that have covered topics within Igbo culture, and then there's sometimes like a debate and, oh, whether that's accurate or not. My response is always that literature, right, writing, creative works, creative depictions are not your source of accuracy, right? You don't learn history from movies. You're introduced to history from movies. You're introduced to history from creative books, right? But if you want accuracy, that's an entirely different art form. right? That's a totally different thing. So don't be too caught up on that. Go ahead and have fun, right? Go ahead and have fun because it is more important to keep some of these ideas in circulation or in mention than to depict it correctly, right? What I do on my channel is aimed towards accuracy. So I'm working towards accuracy, but I'm working towards accuracy for people who want to incorporate these things creatively to do as they wish with them, right? That kind of thing. And I'm not too concerned, and I don't think on the continent itself, the appropriation or the misrepresentation discussion is not really a major discussion because
Me.
a lot of these cultures are bigger and older and deeper and denser than we give them credit for in the West. And one little person's book here and there is not going to change anything. Now, you are going to get those people who use works of art as accounts of history. But at most, I mean, it's like as far as accuracy and art goes, these are bench players. Like, no offense to anybody. It's a bench player. You're going to argue on Twitter a little bit, argue on Facebook. You're not going to actually impact the thing itself. So it's fine. So first and foremost, have fun. Don't be too caught up on if you are the right person to do this, so on and so forth. Most people are just happy to have their culture mentioned in general or featured and so forth. Most people are just happy to be able to say, okay, this thing is incorporates a part of me in it and that kind of thing. The next thing I wanted to discuss is the how to counter narratives, right? So earlier I said that when it comes to Africa, one of the things that makes it hard for like someone like myself who's like a researcher is that there is a lot of propaganda, right? So either hyper positive propaganda or hyper negative propaganda. And sometimes you'll get things in the middle, usually written by Africans themselves. But you'll get things in the middle that end up being the most valuable thing. And so there's actually a long history in this, just due to the history of colonialism. So when the Europeans were arriving in Africa, right, the nature of the people coming forced them to be propagandists, right? So if because let's say now I have a contract, right, or I was hired to go to the lower Niger region, as they called it, and see what's going on over there. And if the place is particularly bad, right? A second contract now opens up for me to maybe set up something there or do something there, right? And so you'll often see, because I read a lot of the European documents when they arrive in Africa, so on and so forth, which, by the way, are not always, again, for the reason I'm stating. Let me check, okay, for the reason I'm stating, are not always the best sources of information. So, in order for me to open a second contract, there may be a pressure for me to create a worst image than there is. If I'm coming on business, there may be a pressure to create a better image than what is. So, what you'll find in European accounts of Africa, right, is it is strongly based off of what the next move is going to be, right? Here's my example. There was, I want to say Dutch, but could be English, but I want to say Dutch. There was a Dutch traveler who came to the city of Benin, right? The earliest writings of Benin you'll find are going to be glowing and celebrating and so forth, right? This place is very advanced. Their streets are perfectly straight. They have street lights everywhere for everybody to see in the dark. They biggest wall structure in the world. You're going to see all of these like things to talk about how well organized it is. This particular document, the man landed and came to Benin. He was met at because Benin was a walled city, right? And this is a city within Africa. This is an ancient city in Africa, right? And so Benin is this walled city. He comes in there. They met him at the gate. They stopped him until they found somebody in the on the other side of the gate who was able to speak his language, which I can't remember the language. And then they brought him there. First, they tried a Portuguese person, and they came and they found his actual. That's how I know he's not a Portuguese person. So this person went through Benin. He was writing about all these wonderful things he was seeing, and so on and so forth. Right. So, what was his motivation? Why was he writing so glowingly about Benin? Right. Because he wants to open a charter to be the person who gets to trade with this place. And in order for him to be the person who gets to trade with this place, he has to return to England or the Netherlands, wherever he's from, and let everybody know, oh man, that place is really happening. There's a lot to do there, yada, yada, yada. These are all the different opportunities. They're very civilized, so on and so on and so forth, right? And so he's writing all these glowing things about Benin so that he can get the okay, well then let's open it up. Just we'll support you as far as the government goes. Going there, if they bother you, we'll come and shoot them all, yada yada yada, right? So he writes glowingly. A few generations later, right? A few generations later, they're now as Europeans. The plan is to sack Benin and take the place over. When they after the Council of Berlin, where they decide to cut up Africa and things like that. They have to get rid of all the major powers. And that was one of the major powers they identified. But the writing of how they describe Benin, oh, the streets are lined in blood. It's nothing but human sacrifice. These are the most depraved people you ever see in your life. There's no ounce, like literally writing, there's no ounce of organization or structure, these different things. Why? Because if I create this picture, I get funding to go do the thing I want to do. And this is the legacy of European writing about Africa, right? European writing about Africa. Now, if I'm going to do a dehumanizing thing to you, I have to first dehumanize you so that I can not only do that thing, but the people behind me can do it too if they have any doubts. Right. One of the things I was talking about in one of our group chats in the Patreon was the American history of war, and every single group of people America goes to war with, like just like any other culture, there's this big propaganda campaign, right, to dehumanize those people. But then when the war ends, America never goes back and goes, okay, no, we were tripping. We were just saying yada, 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 right? So growing up in the aftermath of 9/11, a lot of my understanding of, I thought I was an independent thinker, right? But a lot of my understanding of Islam, for example, was based off of the propaganda that was being pushed at that time. It's this barbaric religion. They don't let women do this. The women hate their condition. They hate what they're. If they come and we free them, they're going to be just like us, a bunch of secular, white men. you know? They're more like us than they are like the men in their culture. The stonings, and there are just all these horrible, horrible things about Islam. And I'm growing up there like, oh man, that's messed up. Yeah, that's messed up. Just preteen, even into my like 20s and so forth. It was very recently with the Afghanistan situation, right? When America's like, okay, we're pulling out of Afghanistan, and there was all this like fake concern. It was pretty fake to me, but some people were maybe really concerned. What about the women in Afghanistan? What about the women? What about the women? And it's like, and I kind of thought about it, like with an adult mind now, like those women are Muslim too, right? I've never been to a culture or a country where the men are more religious than the women. So whatever it is that says in their book, or whatever it is that they are following, typically when you go to a church, you're going to see more women than men. If you go to most spiritual gatherings, you're going to see a more passion within the women than the men for that thing, right? And so it's strange to me that I was running around believing that for some reason the women don't really like what's going on and the men love it. And now that their brothers and husbands have taken over the country, they're all going to be suffering and tortured. And if we, a bunch of people that, a bunch of strangers from a different country come over, we're going to, yeah, that kind of thing. So the history of war and propaganda, right? And there was a large scale war waged on the whole of Africa. So a lot of it is propaganda. So what then happens next is the independence movement, that you have all these people that were educated in the colonial system, and everything they heard about themselves was based off of this propaganda, dehumanizing propaganda. So of course the next thing they do is say, no, that's not accurate. In fact, let me prove you wrong. And then that's how you get the other wing of the propaganda, which is the hyper positive, right? movements like negritude, pan-africanism, so on and so forth, all kind of emerge at the same time. During this liberation movement, a lot of the thinking was, no, we're going to prove this your propaganda wrong. Absolutely necessary, especially for its time, right? So then a lot of the works come and they're proving all these, they're fighting these different things. And there was this group in Nigeria called I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was the Mbari movement or the Mbari house, and it was Chinua Achebe, Wo Shonyeka, who Okibo, Christopher Okibo, which is my favorite poet on earth. Just these different like emerging writers, right? And one of the things that they had, because the dominant trend at that time was then the negritude movement from Senegal. It was from the movements from Senegal. This like, or like, is it from Senegal? Specifically, it was coined in Senegal, but if you look throughout Africa, everybody was kind of doing this thing. And even in the Caribbean and in North America, wherever you see African diaspora people, they were all of the mind of, no, let's prove this thing wrong, right? So this Mbari movement in Nigeria was against that positive depiction, right? They're saying that okay, fine, but this isn't the full picture either, right? And so they were trying to put themselves somewhere in the middle. Now, in the midst of all of this, Chinua Achebe writes "Things Fall Apart," right? But it's still following that original intention of disproving the wave of negative war propaganda from the colonial period. And so "Things Fall Apart" was to say, was a counter to Joseph Conway's A Heart of Darkness, right? And Heart of Darkness was just too, I've never read it, but from what I've heard, the depictions of Africa is like neck and neck with Tarzan, right? And so he's countering this kind of Tarzan type of narrative, but either by accident or on purpose, he writes Things Fall Apart. And within Things Fall Apart, there's kind of a balance where things are not glorified, right? The things that are ugly about our culture are there. It's just all there, and the things that are positive are there. And the main focus is the humanity within the story. And I think that, from my opinion, that's one of the reasons that book kind of took off and became what it is, as far as its success and so forth. And I'm not saying that it was the first book to like kind of try to paint a picture from the middle point, or try to just like, you know what, I'm not on any side. This is just what it is, right? So, and then because of that, a lot of people have a hard time distinguishing Things Fall Apart from actual history. It's a work of literature. It's not history. It's not historical depiction, that kind of thing. It's based off of historical events. There's a lot of historical events in there. If you've read the book, the scene where they tie the bike to a tree, they shoot the European and they tie a bike to a tree to make sure that the bike doesn't go back and tell the other Europeans that they had shot this one European. That is actually something that happened. It happened in the community called Ubusi in today's Anambra State, right? And so, yeah, the that type of thing. So why am I going into this big historical thing? If you're depicting Africa, be aware of that tug of war, right? Be aware of that tug of war. If you want to show something that's just pure positivity, that's fine. If you are just the most racist person on earth and you want to show pure negativity, all right, go ahead and do that too. But be aware of where you're at in there. And if you're not trying to do either, right, know that there's a place in the middle, and that you don't necessarily have to, okay, I'm going to show Africa in a good light. Okay, I'm going to show Africa in a bad light, right? So point number two is, um, be careful of countering narratives, right? Try not to approach for the sake of creating or countering narratives, because unfortunately, because of that tug of war and the extreme negativity from the European space, a lot of African writing is in a battlefield state. It's almost not allowed to just exist and be, right? One of the things I wanted to do with my channel was that I was not going to shy away from difficult or how do you put it? I don't even want to say negative, but topics that aren't aggrandizing or like celebratory, right? That kind of thing. I'm going to put everything in there. I just had a discussion with one of my patrons who asked me, hey, that he read that Igbo people used to kill twins, right? Is that true? I was like, yeah, a lot of Igbo communities killed twins. Some communities opted to have the people known as the Osu in the community adopt them. And then by the time the Europeans started arriving, they had, or the practice of separating the twins had become very common. So you'd have one twin live in one village, another twin live in another village, and for the rest of time, their descendants can't intermarry with each other. And then I gave him the reasoning and that kind of thing behind it. But a lot of people would argue with him and say, no, that never happened. And because, I don't want to depict myself as bad, right? A lot of people there's this thing in Nigeria because a lot of the curriculum is just based off of colonial notes. Right. So when you now say history, the first thing they do is they list off these things they see as negative. Bam, bam, bam. They killed twins. They worship idols. Just like it's like this knee jerk reaction. So that's that extreme negative, right? That's an extreme negative. And the extreme positive is saying, no, it didn't happen, right? But it's silly, right? Both ends are silly because it's like, one, I don't know what's wrong with you over here, but, have fun. And then on this end, I understand your intentions. That's fine. But you have to understand that everybody's history is worse than their present, right? Everybody's history is worse than their present. And when you're aware of that, you can work towards a future that's better than your current present. And that's how progressive thinking, that's one of the pillars for progressive thinking. If you want to just keep saying your past is great and your past is and this kind of thing, you're actually not going to move forward. You're just going to keep looking back at that thing behind you, right? And the present is messed up, but the past was better. No, the past was messed up. The past was messed up. I was very, very fortunate to get to sit down and read the historic accounts of the rise and fall of the community known as Abo in Igbo land. And they were very powerful because they were a powerful like naval power, right? They had these massive ships with cannons and all this stuff, and they used it to just terrorize everybody on that coast. And a lot of what they did was very disagreeable, right? Very, very disagreeable stuff, right? But I was grateful for the opportunity to see what actually happened, right? I don't need to, think of my ancestors as these like saints and so on and so forth. So the if you're writing, be conscious of that narrative countering habit, right? Know that you're not the first person to try to write Africa in a good light. You're not the first person to try to do it in a negative light, right? Sadly, the existence of that like that very aggressive negative creates the need for the very aggressive positive, right? One of the examples now I can use is like Lagos. I would like to Google it, but I want to say that the city of Lagos is more populate, like it's bigger than New York City, right? But the average person does not have, like outside of Nigeria, does not have a visual of Lagos. Why? This massive part of humanity keeps getting cut out. Because if I showed this, I would all of a sudden change the narrative that is typically depicted of Africa, where it's this like open plain and get like two or three Maasai guys, and like, yeah, sure, the white South Africans came, but it was just like two, three guys rolling around before anyway, so big deal, right? That kind of thing. It counters these narratives. But then when they go show Lagos, they'll now show Makoko, right? And Makoko is like a floating slum. You understand? Oh, look at this interesting floating slum. Look at this interest. I've seen Makoko at least four times from major publications, right? But I have never seen Lekki. I have never seen anybody depict Lekki that wasn't African, which is crazy. It would be like, for some reason, you have every depiction of LA is Skid Row. I've seen Skid Row 7 times, but I have never seen anything else in LA. You'd be like, okay, this guy probably has a problem with LA, right? Or this is trying to do something. So yeah, that extreme negative is actually the source of the problem. Because then what happens next is the Africa you've never seen, and then you get all these, oh, we have skyscrapers and we have this and we have that, and this kind of celebration of like all of these shiny fancy things that then cuts out the reality where it's like, yeah, you got that too, but it's a lot of people trying to make it and that kind of thing, and just like any other city, and all those stories you get squashed in this like elephant fight between two very negative ignorance and very positive ignorance. So The number 2 points, that was a very long one, apologies. Number 2 points is be mindful of the countering narratives, or be mindful of the narrative war, right? Number 3, specifics matter, right? So I called this topic Africa. All right, I said Africa in this topic. And on the continent of Africa, if you sell something as African, especially like I think in places like South Africa, it's a little more acceptable or normal. But if you sell something as Africa, you don't really resonate with anybody in like places like Nigeria, for example, right? You can't just say, "Oh, this is the African blank blank blank," and everybody goes, "Oh, what's that?" Because it's this big, vague concept to the average African, right? It is a big, vague concept, and the African person is not wrong in that concept, right? So specifics matter. If you want to write something, it is better to anchor in a specific and expand from there rather than speak from the bird's eye view of this massive continent, right? And it goes so is specifics matter. Most of the good works, or the works that are generally more appreciated about Africa, touch on a specific. There was Octavia Butler's, oh god, I can't remember the title of the book right now. Octavia Butler wrote this great book, and it was one of the things that really touched me is that she spoke about Anyanwu. Anyanwu is the Abara of the sun in or the I don't want to say the goddess of the sun. I don't like that term. It isn't. It's a, but she's the Abara of the sun. So it is the spiritual manifestation of sunlight is Anyanwu, or the sun itself, right? It's Anyanwu. And the fact that Anyanwu was there, it resonates a different way than if we just did like, I don't know, the African sun god or something like that, like just general coverage of Africa, right? That kind of thing. Um, you look at things like let's say Black Panther, right, which was an all right movie. It's a good movie, and it existed for a reason, and there was an effect it had on people that was phenomenal, and so forth, right? But what made that particular thing special was the specifics. Oh, they have insibidi on the wall. Or, oh, wow, this is how this culture in Rwanda actually does this thing, and they depicted it here. And da-da-da-da. There's those little specifics. Specifics matter as far as Africa goes, right? You're never going to have an African culture, right? It's that the idea doesn't exist. There are commonalities you're going to bump into as you move through the continent. But if you're speaking of an African culture, you're not speaking to anybody, especially as far as the continent goes. So specifics matter. It's good to anchor yourself or feature specifics when writing about Africa. That is what makes it special. And it goes into the next point. So number 3 was specifics matter. The next point was that diversity is diverse. There is diversity within diversity in Africa, right? And this is one of the things that I want to give a clear picture on, so that people understand kind of if they're choosing to depict the continent or any continent or cultural feature in there. If you look at Western Europe, right? Western, you can say Western Europe, Western Africa, right? Those are not, there's no correlation to comparison. The cultural diversity of Western Europe is equal. And I've sat down there and I really, so anybody who wants to argue, this is fine. The cultural diversity of Western Europe is equal, or slightly less actually, diverse than Southern Nigeria, not even West Africa or Africa, right? The diversity is actually that. And these aren't tiny little nations, these are massive groups, right? These are massive groups. The culture we call Yoruba culture, or the space, Yoruba space, is roughly population wise somewhere between Spain and France, right? And that's just Yoruba, right? And then you move over a little bit and then you have a whole bunch of others and so on and so forth. Igbo, just about the exact same number, right? Somewhere between Spain and France. You understand? So why am I saying this? If I'm depicting something Yoruba and I'm featuring things that are specifically Igbo, because a lot of things are shared, but things that are specifically Igbo, it is the equivalent of writing about the Eiffel Tower of Russia, right? You would never do that. That sounds silly, but oftentimes when Africa gets depicted, it's like, okay, whatever, this is a big blanket, whatever. So there's diversity within diversity, right? Now, if you're writing something historic, you'd have to understand that you wouldn't be thinking in the context of Yoruba as a historical person, because Yoruba is now broken into different kingdoms, and those kingdoms are somebody's country. In Igbo land, the communities we have are people's country, right? Now, what's the importance of saying that? Every country is gonna, this kind of goes into my point number one, two, three, four. Wait, one, I should have numbered them. I just put bullets. One, two, three, four, five. Point number five is structures. So why does diversity within diversity matter, right? Because if you're writing about Igbo land and you're writing about a kingdom, it's not going to work out, or it won't make sense, because the governing structure of Igbo land for both the average Igbo community is either a theocracy, if you want to be whatever, it's either a theocracy, and those are like the fringe communities on the outskirts, or a republic, like a voting republic. In the Yoruba culture, it's a monarchy, right? So there's diversity within diversity. If you're going to speak about a specific culture, know the specifics of that culture, and know that it gets very different once you cross the river, right? It gets very different once you go north. It gets very different when you go over there. And that's one of the things that makes writing about the region very interesting. So, my first point was go ahead and have fun, do whatever you want to do. But if accuracy is something that you feel would enhance your story, or you want to anchor onto the specifics or authenticity, be aware that when I mention a culture, I'm mentioning a country. That is somebody's country. Igbo is a nation. Nigeria, I think we call Nigeria, is more comparable to the EU than it is to a European country, right? That kind of thing. The thing we call Nigeria is more comparable to the EU. So if I'm writing about the Sokoto Caliphate, my story takes place in the Sokoto Caliphate, and they're doing something that is brazenly Bini, right? It wouldn't make sense. It would be sillier, or more off than the like having a Chinese emperor ruling over historical Sweden, right? It'd be that level of off. But I feel like when it comes to Africa, people take liberties and things like that. So it happens a lot. We see that a lot, right? There's a diversity within the diversity of Africa. So, okay, I'm talking about the Igbo culture. Okay, I'm going to depict the government. It's democratic. So they're going to have elections. They're going to vote on things. There's going to be politicking and that type of thing. Okay, I go to the Yoruba culture. It's a monarchy. Okay, there's going to be secession situations, all the things that come with monarchy and so forth. If I go a little bit more to the Akan culture, just different things, those type of things, right? So there are structures within the diverse. Once you get to a different culture, the structures change, right? The way of doing things change. Again, there are always those blanket things that unite everybody and make everything, come together, right? But the structures change, and if you want to enhance your story, it would be nice to incorporate those things, or to be aware that each culture is going to have its different structure and its own different way of doing things, right? Point number, okay, my next point. I lost track of the numbers. I really should have put numbers. I just put dots, right? Next point is that people from the past are no different or not that different from people of today, right? And one of the things that kind of opened my eye to that idea, or to that fact, was in studying Insibidi. So I have a video, for those who are interested in Insibidi, on my channel. If you go to the channel, just search, type Insibidi, it'll pop up, right? And so what Insibidi is a writing system that was used in the Igbo, Efik, Ibibio, just this net of cultures in the space we now call the Biafra region, right? They all, or groups within them, not even all of them, but groups within each of those cultures use this language, this written language called Insibidi. Insibidi itself was a code, right? So Insibidi was a secret code. But Insibidi is based on, or finds a relationship with the thing called Uli, we now call Uli, right? But Uli itself is just a die. And Uli was like, what is most remembered about Uli is like a tattooing system. So the different symbols you put on, women do Uli, different symbols you put on your body and put on your wall and use to decorate and things like that. And the symbols would have these very specific meanings, so that you can send very specific messages, right? So when it comes to insibidi, there's two forms of insibidi. I call it two forms of insibidi, but they're almost like two different things, right? And but they're the same thing at the same time. Hard to explain. So there's the secret insibidi, which was the taking that same Lee kind of writing system and forming a secret code where a specific secret society known as the Ekbe Society, also the Okonko and other ones like that, but secret societies would use it to pass messages amongst each other, right? So that is the secret insibidi. It's got some symbols that the general public one doesn't. But then there's this public insibidi that everybody writes, specifically women, right? And there is, and I'm not using the term gossip derogatory in a derogatory way, because gossip is a, I think people need to start taking gossip as far as history goes very seriously, because that's where you actually find the humanity in these narratives, right? There's a lot of gossip written in insibidi that was preserved throughout time, and it's hilarious. And it sounds like it just sounds like Twitter. Like it sounds like um regular every what we would call us regular everyday people. So we're running around, we're doing all these little ratchet things, having arguments about different high value man, low value, all these stupid things. And you now come to find that your ancestors were having those exact same arguments because the gossip is preserved in the public insibidi, the women's insibidi, the one the women did, right? So there was somebody, I have a document in my library. If you're interested in reading more about insibidi and reading this specific story I'm talking about, go to patreon.com/the medicine shell. At any level, when you become a patron at any level, you have access to the library. And I have an insibidi folder that has all these different stories written in insibidi and things like that, right? So one particular story was that a man, and he had done this, right? A man had wrote on a woman's wall, "You cheated on me and gave me crabs. Now I'm leaving," right? And this is what he wrote in insibidi: "You cheated on me and gave me crabs. Now I'm leaving." And it was this big, funny, salacious thing, obviously, right? So then they showed the visiting European guy, "Hey, take a look at this. You want to learn about insibidi? Check this out. It says that this guy gave this girl that kind of thing." Another one that I have in my thing was a court trial. And it was basically a husband had cheated on the wife, and the whole ordeal and how it happened and how this girl came and separated these people. So people back then are very much like people now, right? And oftentimes when we depict the past, we some people sometimes, like, I'll read some things, or like kind of being a level above, people now, and so on and so forth. Or oftentimes, like with like the polar opposite with the West, there's this like very inaccurate idea that people in the past were like a level below people now, right? So every 5 seconds, a white guy comes and goes, "Hey, it turns out back in the day, women used to do art. Hey, it turns out back in the day, women used to hunt. Hey, it turns out back in the day, women used to fish." Da, da, da. It's like things are really not that different. Sometimes we tell ourselves that things are different to exaggerate the level of progress that we've made, right? Now, as I said earlier, if you line it up, the present is typically better than the past, because whatever you were doing that was inconveniencing you in the past, hopefully you learn and you move on, or else you die off or something. I don't know, right? But as far as human behavior, just the brain of the human being has not changed. So if you're writing about Africa, you're writing about any culture within Africa, and like maybe you're writing for something from the past, maybe you're writing something from the present, just know that the humanity you experience is not exclusive to you and your culture and your time and so forth, right? What the things that you see and go through, and the world that you're experiencing is not that different from the world of that time. There was another really good one that I had. Okay, no, I don't have this one in the library, but I'm hunting it down. It was a European guy. He went to Abo and he went to Onitsha. And when he went to Abo, or like the Abo area, he met this guy named Eze Okoro, or I think his name was Eze Okoro, but he called him King Boy. If you translate it, it's Eze Okoro, that kind of thing. So I just called that. Called him King Boy. And he was talking to, he was trying to learn about the area and like set up trade relations and so forth. He kept getting sick. And so King Boy took him to Onitsha, to his father-in-law, who was the Obi of Onitsha, which is like, an Obi is like the head priest of Onitsha. It gets translated as king now, whatever. The He's the head priest of Onitsha. So they took him to the Obi of Onitsha, and and he was there. He was in like a, what, it was like a sick room, a hospital in Onitsha. And this is like back in the day. And there was this woman that was watching over him, and she used to have people come and like see her her white guy, her white man, like, hey, come see this white man, that kind of thing. So people come, like, he was getting tired of people looking at him like an exhibit, that kind of thing. When he started getting healthier, he went and spoke to the OB, and he saw this girl that was like, he was clear, like, he didn't express it, but from then on, there was this focus on this particular good-looking girl. And okay, I forgot to mention this. When he had spoke about King Boy, he found King Boy very annoying, right? He was very annoyed by King Boy. One of the things that annoyed him about King Boy is he felt like King Boy was pompous. King Boy used to, anytime King Boy would run into a European, he would have him write something in a book, no matter what, just write something in a book, right? And so he thought King Boy was a fool because he didn't know what these people were writing. And a lot of things they were writing were like funny or derogatory and things like that, right? But he was collecting these things, collecting these things. And what he came to find was that King Boy would then use this book to go to different places and open trade relations and be like, hey, I have access to Europeans. They got this, this, and that. If you want to get to them, talk to me. Here's my proof. They wrote their little scribbly language in this book, right? And then so that King Boy now becomes very wealthy. But initially he thought King Boy was some kind of pompous fool, right? And he was writing about King. Everything he writes about King Boy is like very negative, but he wasn't negative about everybody else, right? And then he keeps talking about this girl, and then all of a sudden he finds out that King Boy is engaged to this girl, right? And then I'm like, oh, that's why this guy wrote every time this girl looked at him, every single thing like that, right? Things like that. So again, really no different. Just some jealous guy, you know. I kind of think the past is no different. Africa is no different as far than the life you're living now. So whatever, you know, if you want to write, you don't have to try not to write an African person as something outside of just normal human behavior, ethos, motivations, things like that, right? Thing number two. Now, as much as I'm saying that things don't change that much as far as human behavior over time, cultures have a system of logic or a system of thinking. And that system of thinking is usually embedded in what we would call their spirituality, right? 4, 5, 6, 7. This is point number seven, by the way. Point number seven is usually embedded in what we would call their religion or their spirituality. You can then decipher the logic of the culture there, right? And from there, you can then piece together how things would play out by being mindful of culture, right? Being mindful of culture. You could then find how things would play out. So when you're writing a narrative, there is for example, I'm currently working on a book, right? Um, I'm on draft number two. One of my vows for Onwa Ifeke, which is the third moon, the Ikenga moon, was to finish the editing process of it, right? By harvest. I believe I said by harvest, but I've been thinking by harvest in my head this whole time. So by harvest. So by harvest, I'm going to be done with the draft two. Right now, one of the things I did in editing was I talked to my father-in-law and I talked to my wife, who've spent a lot more time in Nigeria. And there were a lot of Americanisms that I had in my narrative, just on just how people would interact, tiny little things, right? Tiny little things, tiny little uses of words, things like that, where it's like, no, somebody in this culture wouldn't say that, or somebody wouldn't say that kind of thing, right? As much as I come and I share all these things, I do have blind spots as far as our culture goes, Igbo culture goes, and things like that, major ones, you know. And so they were able to help me fill the blind spots. And then after a while, I started, you know, remembering that, okay, there's a specific type of logic that comes with every culture. And therefore, there's a logic that comes with American culture, a logic that comes with English culture, and Bini culture, Maasai culture, Zulu culture, that type of thing that you have to be aware of. And one of the best places to learn that algorithm or that logic, as far as the culture goes, is to look into the spirituality of the people, right? Or even look at previous events in that happened there and how it played out and that type of thing. So be aware that the logic will shift when you go to different cultures. Again, the human interactions within that logic don't shift, right? So one of the things I'm going to be sharing on my next video, which is going to be on the 4 market days, is the idea that the 16 of you in here are getting a sneak peek, but the idea that nobody dies on Eke Day, right? So Eke Day is a sacred day. So in the logic of our ancestors, and I explain it in the video, if you die on Eke Day, it was the work of providence. It was work of providence that you were supposed to die on that day, right? And it's not seen as a good thing that when you die on Eke Day. But I had this opportunity to speak to this elder from Umuahia, and the elder was letting me know that when he was young, that was very much a big thing. But that what people they were saying was that nobody dies on AK Day because even if they died on AK Day, human behavior, they would lie and find a way to get around it. Right. And it'd be like the person would pass away. They just close the person's door and be like, yeah, we're still attending to them, that kind of thing. And then they wait till the next day and they're like, oh, they passed at night or that kind of thing, and so on and so forth. Right. So again, the situation played out the way it played out because of the culture and that type of thing. But then the human behavior, which is the same everywhere, just finding shortcuts, finding ways around things, so on and so forth, also played out. And it together, to me, it made a very interesting, came together and make a very interesting story. So the saying was, nobody dies on AK Day, so on and so forth. Another one is the twin burial thing, or the Igbo people kill twins. Yes, that is, or like not all of them, but like there are groups within the Igbo culture that do it, right? And so that did it, not do it, sorry, did it in the past. And so, but most people, right, especially wealthier people, once you would have one child and you know that a twin was coming, they would find a way around it, or they can check your stomach and see if you're going to have twins. They'll find a way around it, right? So suddenly somebody else adopts the child, right? Okay, we're going to have, you're going to go on a journey, you're going to go on a trip, right? And you're going to go very far away, and then you're just going to happen to go into labor at this exact specific time. And when you go into labor, we're going to find a way that this person raises this kid, and then they come back, and maybe you adopt them, and it's not the twin. Right? There's tons of story in Igbo culture how they were getting around this particular rule. But in the logic of the cosmology and so forth, the twin killing was a feature, right? And it made sense to them. But the human behavior is that this rule is here. I don't like it. Here's how I'm going to get around it, right? And you find a lot of that. I think one of my patrons, Chimoge, had said, I don't know if you guys are commenting, by the way, because I can't see. Oh, chat is disconnected. Please wait while you connect. Unable to connect chat. Oh, I was like, man, this is the quietest discussion I've ever had. I don't know why chat is disconnected. I'm not going to play around too much with it. It's just YouTube. So, those of you who are asking questions and so forth, my dearest apologies. Maybe if I put my email address, yeah, this is a long shot, send me an email. I'll take a look at the end and see if I got any emails with specific questions and things like that. I haven't been ignoring you guys. It's just that on my end, the chat is off. I don't even know if this live is on. I see 17, 19 people in here. I'll assume that you guys are all showing everything like that. I don't know why it says like, I was like, why is nobody saying anything today? You know? But yeah, so there's a logic that comes with a culture, and you have to be mindful of that logic, and then also be aware that this is also being imposed on humans. So it probably didn't pan out exactly like that. That's why oftentimes people ask me a question, oh, like, in did they do this in Igbo culture? Did they believe in this in Igbo? Did they do, yeah? It's like, yeah, you can have your beliefs, but then like there are things that are just like human nature, and people are gonna do it, or like if the rule's inconvenient, it's not gonna last that long, right? People are just gonna do whatever. There was this theory, I don't know if I was reading it or thinking it honestly, but I'll just go ahead and say reading it. It was talking about the idea of scofflaws, right? And a scofflaw is a person that kind of follows their own laws. And it went for this was a long time ago, so I don't even know how the information got to me. But it went into the idea that everybody is a scofflaw. So you can write all the laws you want, but people are ultimately going to do what they want to do, right? And if there's most people are not aware of all the laws in their city, state, town, country, whatever, and everybody's going to do the exact thing they do. I'm going to drive at 65 miles an hour to work every single day. I don't know what the speed limit is, and it's like I don't even know if I need to go fast, I'm gonna go fast, that kind of thing. Everybody's a scofflaw. It's kind of examining the logic of writing laws, because ultimately culture is the law, right? Whatever the culture is the law. Um, Even where now there's this big abortion discussion in the United States, and one of the things that you read often people say is that you can't ban abortions, you can only ban safe abortions, right? that kind of thing. People are going to do the human thing no matter what. They're going to do the thing human beings have been doing since the beginning of time. You understand? And you can only make it a little bit more inconvenient with a law or an edict or a decree, but ultimately people are going to people, right? People are going to be people, are going to be people. Now, those laws are going to come from a set cultural logic, right? And understanding the logic of the cultures you're following, which is typically embedded in their spirituality, right, will then unlock a lot of things. That is also why it's very important to approach cosmologies and spiritualities as themselves rather than comparing them to other things. Once you kind of start feeling comfortable enough to know what's going on, you can then start making those comparisons, right? But I see it all the time where it'll be like a list of Igbo gods, and I'm like, this one was actually Zeus, this one was actually Mars, this one was whatever. And it's like the Greek logic on this thing and the Igbo logic on this thing are very different. And if you understand the algorithm of both, right, you're going to gain 10 times more than trying to make those comparisons. So oftentimes those comparisons are like, okay, I know what this is, moving on. That's really what it is, right? So you see Equinsu, oh, okay, Equinsu, that's which one they always compare it with? Aries. Okay, not Aries, Mars? Yeah, that's Mars. Okay, moving on. Oh, okay. Uh Ungu. They use Ungu a lot for Jupiter or Zeus. Ungu, okay, that's Jupiter, that's Zeus. Moving on, right? That happens often, and it doesn't need to. Okay, that doesn't need to happen because you lose a lot in the specifics. Now, here's my example. There's this theory that a lot of the famous Greek thinkers and a lot of the famous people in Greek history never existed, right? They never existed. The ones they point at are Homer. That Homer doesn't exist. There's no such thing as Homer. Pythagoras, right? Pythagorean theorem. You learn about that in school and that kind of thing. This person was never a human. They never existed. Fictitious person. Socrates. There's debate. This person never existed, right? And ever since I became they're not interested, but like ever since I started researching my own culture's cosmology and kind of seeing the algorithm that things are run under, I started understanding what that was over there, right? And it didn't come from saying, oh, this is that, that is this is that, right? It told me, my cosmology told me to go back to Greek mythology, right? And pay attention to the logic there. And oftentimes in Greek mythology, you have this thing where a human being goes, I did something, right? And the god associated with God, I don't think, again, different thing. The god associated with that thing goes, oh, you think you did that? And then punishes them, right? So if somebody thinks they're more beauty than Aphrodite, she punishes them. There's a story about the weaver. This woman was a better weaver than, I think, Athena. I'm not 100% sure. And then Athena punished her by turning her into a spider, right? There's this constant being punished for hubris or thinking that that you did something, right? Prometheus, he brought fire to human beings and he thought he was smart. They punished his ass, right? There's this, I'm sorry, I cursed. There's this consistent punishing of people who aggrandize themselves or think that they're greater than whatever. So what is that, right? Somewhere in the Greek cultural logic, it is somewhat taboo to claim that something came from you because it's actually the muses and the spirits and what we call the gods that are giving you this thing to go do something with. So if you now act like you own it, they are going to humble you. So when people would have great ideas in Greece, they would then, this is a personal theory, by the way. I don't know if it's like a thing. When people have great ideas, they would say, Socrates said, blah, 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 blah. That the punishment is not for me. I'm not saying I said it. Socrates said it. Now, there's no such thing as Socrates. There's not a real person. So you get these, I want to use the term egregore, right? You get these egregores or these fictitious people throughout Greece who were these great knowers and great doers and great thinkers. Homer, he came up with I think the Iliad or the Odyssey, one of them, whatever, or both, I don't know. Plato taught this, or not, Socrates taught Plato, and then Plato teaches Aristotle, and Aristotle teaches Alexander the Great. I think that's the succession line, right? That kind of thing. But the person at the very top, the first one, now we're starting to debate whether these were real people. But if you look at the cultural logic, which is displayed in their mythology, you're like, oh, okay, it makes sense. I'm not going to come out and say I invented this. The God that gave it to me is going to strike me down, right? And much of what I'm going to be doing, right, is trying to get that muse or that spirit to give me something that I can use to make myself great or solve my problems. But under no circumstance should I come out and say I'm the one who did that thing. Right. Of course, that eventually fell apart, and people started, oh, this one founded gravity. Nobody knew that shit fell before this guy talked about gravity, that kind of thing. So that fell apart as far as Western culture goes. But it was very much a real thing for the Greeks, and so there's a logic that comes with understanding. And so if you're going to cover a culture, if you want to understand their logic and how they think, look at their spirituality as itself. Don't do the shortcut of saying, uh, um, oh, Thor, that's their Zeus. The Thor is not their Zeus. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe it is. But what do they say? Because what Zeus is and what Thor is might be a similar idea. But what is each culture saying about that idea? That's where you get the logic or the system of thinking from the people. Hey, Namdi. And then number 8
And
is, if you're
see
not
what
from the
Daddy said.
culture,
Oh,
yes, if you're not from the culture, involve somebody from the culture in the process. Now, this doesn't mean think that every Igbo person is an expert on Igbo culture, right? That doesn't mean think that every Egyptian is just going to break down the whole pharaohic XYZ for you and so forth, right? Don't just assume that you're dealing with an expert. But it kind of goes back to a point I made earlier. They're going to be able to catch tiny little nuances that maybe you would have never caught, right? Here's an example. There was this movie, I can't remember what it is or what it's called, but it's Lupita. And I had to turn the movie off because in one of the first scenes, Lupita spat, right? It's like somebody did something and she was showing them like, oh, whatever, dude. And she goes, tuh, and spits, right? And this was supposed to be, I think, somewhere in Kenya. And maybe they're out there spitting in Kenya. I doubt it, right? But I know that back home, right? Again, the cultures are different, but I know that spitting, like African cultures are different, but there are similarities. Spitting, passing gas, just releasing things from yourself in a public space is very egregious. One of the culture shocks I had when I moved back from Nigeria back to America was I did not want to blow my nose in the middle of class. So you'd have a runny nose as like a 7-year old, 8-year old, and so forth. And in American culture, you go to there, and while the teacher's talking, you start and blowing your nose. But where I'm from, that's wild. Like you don't, especially when like an elder is talking, you just start blowing, you're releasing snot real quick, and then going and sit down. Everybody has to act like you're not doing it, right? Why don't I just start peeing, right? That kind of thing. That's how I was seeing it. One of the first fights I ever got into was this kid who spat near my foot, and he was being like, I mean, things were already escalating, right? As a bunch of 8-year-olds on a playground, but he spat next to my foot, and I thought that was like, oh, it's on. But he was just like, it might be a Midwest thing, but like, there was a time in the night, maybe still going on, where white Midwest people used to just spit a lot. That's something I noticed when I first moved back to America. And he was just doing that. He just, it was like a normal thing. And that was so crazy to me that I just started swinging, right? And so just things like that. So when I saw that scene where she spat, it was like weird. So that's a tiny little thing that somebody who's lived there would be able to identify. Now, I highly doubt it's different in Kenya, but it might be different in the culture that she's depicting. And oftentimes we put a lot of like weight on the person, the actor or the actress in a movie, like they're the ones making this happen, but they're the least empowered person unless they're like very, very, very A-list. They're usually the least empowered person in the entire thing, because this is somebody who's being told exactly what to do at all times, in a very specific way, right? It would be like thinking that the models on a runway are the ones making the clothes. So I don't think Lupita made this decision, that kind of thing. But things like that, right? Involve people from the culture. And creativity is a collective process, right? You can't be creative alone, right? I, right, am an Igbo person, but I didn't grow up in Nigeria as a preteen, as a teenager, as a young adult, anything like that. My wife did. So there are things that she catches that, oh, okay, I didn't, okay, yeah, that is right. They wouldn't say it that way, right? Or okay, yeah, that does make sense, that kind of thing. Because she's had experiences I haven't had. They're tiny little things that like you wouldn't think twice about, but somehow when you read it, you now hear the American person writing that thing, right? And this isn't to like say that you have to be dependent on these like extra people or anything like that, but don't be afraid to consult. Don't be afraid to talk to people that are in cultures you're trying to cover. They're not going to be experts. Not everybody's going to be an expert on like, oh, in 1512, this king did that and yada, yada, yada. But they could tell you the tiny little things like, oh, this scene where this person said, I don't know, this scene where this scene where the person, okay, like for example, like if you're writing about Igbo culture, right, and somebody walks in the room and just starts talking, I would know that okay, that wouldn't work that way, right? With Americans, you kind of get to the point. Hey, how you doing? I'm good. Hey, by the way, do you know where? Da, 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 That's just normal American interaction, right? So as an American, I'm inclined to write interactions like that. But with Igbo culture, you're going to stop. You're going to, how are you doing? I'm good. How's your family? You can take your time. Greeting is a big deal. Greeting is a big deal. So if I want to depict somebody as foolish, I would have them walk in a room and start talking, right? Whereas in America, oh no, this person's just a go-getter. They just try and get things done, or like they're just like, that kind of thing, right? But if I want to depict somebody as foolish, that's how I would depict it in that culture, right? And you wouldn't know that without that lived experience. And if you don't have a lived experience, you can substitute it by talking to people who've had that lived experience. Hey, I want you to read this and see what you think, or and like that kind of thing. And point out these little weird things that you, or I'll call it weird, but it's whatever. But these little tiny different things that you maybe would not have thought of, right? So if I want to depict somebody as foolish, that's one of the ways I can do it. Doesn't mean just, oh, they would never do it in the culture, don't do it. Again, these are human beings. Even if there's a rule, the person who breaks rules is always going to be the person who breaks rules, right? The person who breaks rules in every culture is always going to be the person who breaks rules in every culture. And they're going to be, so if the rule is in our culture, we don't cross the street while covering our eyes, that person's going to cover their eyes. If they go to another place, that same person is going to, do the opposite if the opposite is the rule, right? So okay, this is how a normal interaction with people happens. But this person doesn't do the normal interaction. I'm depicting them as foolish, right? Or I'm depicting them as like out there, right? And you may not catch it. You may not necessarily catch it, but okay, now I see what's going on. I get it, that kind of thing. There was this good example of this that, okay, like in Nollywood before, so when my dad, we came back in like the mid 90s. And my dad and we all kind of just stayed in America until like very early 2000s, call it 2003. My dad goes back for the first time in a very long time for himself. And, or what felt like a long time, but it was actually like 6-ish years maybe. He goes back in like 2003 or so. And he comes back with a bunch of Nollywood movies. Now we had never seen, like we had been so gone from Nigeria that we were there when what is considered the first Nollywood movie, which is if anybody remembers the title, Andy, I love you. Living in Bondage. I hate that the chat is off, by the way. I don't know why the chat is off. I hate that the chat is off. Living in Bondage had come out, right? And so this was the first big Nollywood movie. Nigeria had movies before, but Nollywood is a very specific thing, right? The first, buy your copy now. The first one of those, right? And so we were there because I remember my sister came back from Lagos, like, oh, she saw this movie. And the guy was like, Andy, I love you. And she was so scared. Everybody was like freaking out. And so we were all like talking about this movie, Living in Bondage. And then we were gone. We come back down. Now it was this gigantic sensation since we had been gone. So my dad comes back with a bunch of these movies. And one of the movies featured Aki is it Aki? No, it's Popo. Featured Spanner. The movie was Spanner, right? Those who've seen Spanner will know what I'm talking about. Spanner 1 and 2. And so Spanner was he's a dwarf, right? What we would call a dwarf in America.
Daddy,
Yes, Namdi, what's up?
you're being young.
I'm being long. Okay, I'm almost done. I'm so sorry. I'm almost done. Okay, this is the last. This is point number 8. This is the last point. So Spanner was a dwarf. I want you to go with mommy, okay? Because I'm about to talk about something crazy. So go to mommy. Close the door. Spanner was a dwarf, and Spanner, it was a comedy, and part of the comedy was that Spanner was just like very useless as people back home would say, right? He's just like a layabout, good for nothing, just kind of that kind of thing. And he's like a frustrating person to deal with. And so you take this frustrating person to deal with and you put him in all these different situations. There was one where Spanner was like constantly sleeping with girls all the time. And I remember my friends would come over and we'd watch this movie because we thought it was so funny, but they all thought Spanner was cool. Like, oh man, like this dude is cool. Like he set up like I think this is Span he just set up all these different scams and he's getting all these girls and da, 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 da. But in the Nigerian culture of the time, especially, his promiscuity, the amount of sex he was having, was used to depict how useless and foolish he was, right? How much of a fool he was. Whereas in American culture, you get that see that montage where the guy's getting all the girls. His life is escalating. He's doing, he's the man, right? So I say that to say it's when you don't have that lived experience and you want to write a culture that you didn't have a lived experience with, it's sometimes good to talk to people within that culture or show them your work or discuss your work with them. Don't be beholden to them, right? They're not God. Don't be beholden to them. Don't be dependent on them, that kind of thing. Have fun ultimately, but sometimes they'll catch those little things, right? Like, oh, okay, back home, this person would actually be like a problem. They'd be, this isn't like a courageous person. This is like a fool in our culture, right? That kind of thing. Oh, this person is like a proper child. Okay, they would show being a proper child this way, that kind of thing, just because of the little nuances that human history and geography and separation creates. So, those are really it. Those are my 8 points of 8 things to look at if you're writing about Africa. I was very inspired. This is not a critique of anybody who has sent me any work. I was actually very inspired by what you guys are doing. I like, as far as my channel goes, I measure success by that. Like if people are using my work, or maybe like just incorporating my work into something that they're doing, I see that as like the ultimate reward, honestly. Right. I see that as the ultimate reward because a lot of the things I'm delivering and the method that I deliver it, not everybody receives at the like raw information level. Some people want to see it in a movie. Some people want to see it in music. Some people want to see it in a play. Some people want to see it in a painting. Some people want to read it. Right. But not everybody's going to receive it at the level I receive it. So it's cool that those who receive it at the level, like, I'm not saying level like intelligence, it's not an intelligence thing, it's like a preference. Like, for example, I can sit down and read an entire history textbook, but for me to read like engineering, I can't read engineering. I have to like watch a movie of, or like see the visuals, like when the History Channel. Almost. In the History Channel, they used to have like how they built the Great Wall of China. I could watch that, but like I'm to sit down and look at the blueprint and like if I'm setting up something by IKEA, I can't look at the blueprint. It just can't. It won't. It doesn't register, right? So people receive different types of information through different mediums. So the diversification of mediums by which this thing is sent out there, to me, is a major metric for success. So it was have fun, uh, uh, be aware of the counter narrative dynamic. Specifics matter. Specifics are what make the story really good when it comes to African stuff, right? Because we get these big blanket things. One of the criticisms for Wakanda is like, okay, where is this, right? Or like, this is who is this? Like, what was being depicted here? Just all the Africans, like whatever. But then the specifics within there, like, oh, there's insipidity there. That's very, very like it makes the thing rich, right? That kind of thing. Diversity within diversity. One village will give you enough material to cover 10 Game of Thrones, right? African history is very long, right? It goes back very far, and the amount of action and activity that happens in what you would think is a small space would blow your mind, right? So I was privileged, and when I was talking about this point, I was privileged to get access to like a book about, or it was like it's like a short kind of thing, but about Abo, the community in Igbo land. Abo, I'm probably saying it wrong, and about how when they were like a major naval power, right? And there was the level, the amount of politics happening in that lower night, what they call the lower Niger area, right? The eastern part is equivalent to what you would see in like Western Europe as a whole, right? So the amount of diversity in Africa is so you don't need to like don't think macro, think micro. Start from something that you think is small and pan out because these things are not small,
Daddy,
right? Yes, honey.
I found a potato.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So yeah. So yeah, diversity within diversity. Structures, right? Societies are structured different in different culture. Be mindful of how you are writing. Namdi, Bachuzo, Bachuzo. Machuza, thank you. So be mindful of how you're writing the different cultures because the structures are different. In my own culture, the average Igbo community, the average Igbo country, right, was a republic. It was a republic. The way decisions were made was a Geoffo, the Alpha holders of each family would gather in a Congress and they would debate and debate and debate. And they would try to reach a consensus or they would vote based off of majority. And then there was a Congress of men and there was a Congress of women. This is in every Igbo code, like every word Igbo had. And there were specific decisions that were women's, specific that were men's, and it wasn't like one was super old, like the women get to decide what the baskets look like, that kind of thing, right? It was women handled commerce and trade within the community, men handled long distance commerce and trade, those types of things, right? So when you're writing about it, and it's like I saw like God, what was that thing called? Tears of the Sun. My dad got so angry when he watched that. He was looking forward to it too. He got so angry because the end of the movie was they united the Igbos with the king of the Igbos, right? That's how they solved, that's how Bruce Willis solved Biafra. He united the Igbo refugees with the king of the Igbos, right? And that concept is very asinine as far as the structure in Igbo culture. Now, if you go over to the north and you're writing about Hausa culture, right? That would make sense, right? Sokoto Caliphate, the person that's running the Sokoto Caliphate is going to run the whole thing. So yeah, I united you with the king of the Hausas. Now that's not his title. That's not what you're going to call that person, but it would make a little bit more sense in that structure. It's like if you were writing a story about the Great Depression and then the Great Depression ends because the Prince of America finally overthrows the Japanese emperor, who was that kind of thing. Maybe you're writing some weird world, whatever, but typically when these happen, that's not a part of the plot. It's just like you were trying to include history and it didn't happen. So, but if you want to write some like contrived ass whatever, as long as the story is good, I don't think people care. So yeah, be mindful of structures. People of the past are not different from the people of the present. People on different continents are really not that different. One of the things about writing is it lets you see, it gives you a glimpse into the presence of humanity in the different places that you read about. Good literature, good writing, right? The good things you write. I'm a big fan of, and I forgot his name, but the white guy that writes the samurai books. Uh, I'm a fan of his, and he one of the things I like about his books is that he has a like three the Guy Jin series. There's three of them. I can never remember authors, by the way. There's three of them, and as the books go, he becomes less like because you can tell he's like this big history nerd. And so his first two books, he's just trying to like let you know all the cool stuff he likes about Japan and oh they did this here and that's actually this thing in the culture and you see that a lot. I still like it, but like you see it a lot, it takes away. But then like towards the end I think the last one's Taipei. I could be wrong. It's a lot more human. It's about the people in there, the humanity in there, and that brought it alive. But even the other ones had a lot of humanity too. So it's again, you're in this Japanese world, and you're seeing like people like yourself and having interactions similar to you. He did a good job of doing that. It usually comes when you appreciate a culture, right? And then I think, yeah, even within the fact that humans are going to be humans everywhere, there is a cultural logic, right? There's a general cultural logic. And then point eight, the final point was in order to understand that cultural logic, it's sometimes it's good to talk to people in the culture that you're trying to depict to involve them in the process and so forth. But the number one point, the main point is to have fun. Don't be afraid of imposter syndrome, right? Who am I to write this thing? That kind of thing. If you're passionate about something, if your chi says, do this thing, go do that thing, right? The world is a person in their chi. That's the thing you should be listening to. If your original spark, if the divinity within you, the thing that motivates you, gives you purpose, gives you light, gives you path, says, write that story, go write that damn story, right? Go write the damn story. Don't worry about, oh, they said that in the culture, in my culture, we're supposed to drink with cups this way, and they had it this way in the book. Who cares? That's not that person's not important, right? Just let that thing out. That thing is inside of you for a reason. Have fun while you're doing it. Let it out. If you're aiming to enrich your story with accuracy, the other points are become more important. If you are letting out something that's within you, some type of spark of inspiration, point number one is the only point you need to really pay
Daddy, I
attention to.
thought you were done.
I'm all right now, teacher. Now I'm almost done. So that being said, as you see, my manager is letting me know that time is running out. I want to thank you guys for coming. If you
Daddy.
want to support the channel, you can support at patreon.com/the medicine shell. Patrons get access to my library. So, like, for example, if you're writing like,
Daddy,
yes, mommy.
well, guess what?
I'm gonna see if you guys have comments in the email. Just that was a long shot. I don't know. The chat is off for some reason. I don't know how to turn it back on. I'm not gonna play with this thing. If you guys want to message me on whatever social media platform that we communicate on, message me if you had questions or comments or jokes or anything. I missed the jokes. Like, I feel that maybe somebody has said, I know if Chimoge is awake, he's probably said something by now that would make me scratch my head, right? But who knows? I can't see who's in the chat or not for some reason, right? So, anyways, in for patrons, I have this library. So I'm constantly researching. Again, I consider myself a student teacher. I'm constantly researching, constantly reading, constantly learning. I finally got a hold of what seems to be the only available book on the Ekumeku War, for example. And what I do is I put every single thing that I collect that's digital into a library. So I have tons of books. A lot of them are rare. Some of them were like free online at one point, then they were taken off, but they're still in the library, right? So that pertains to Igbo spirituality, culture, cosmology. It also covers different cultures, such as Santeria, Hoodoo, Obe, Voodoo, all these different ones, right? That kind of thing. So I cover all the different cosmologies and spiritualities that I can find, but I organize them by topic. So if like, okay, I want to write a story about Nimni, right? Or the water goddess, right? Water goddess, the Abara of water. I have a folder that has just phenomenal stuff in there. This the same stuff I looked at when I made my video. There are things that I didn't even get to mention that were in there. Maybe I'll put in a second video someday later. There are things that are, of course, I mentioned, but it goes into detail and shows you where I was coming from with what I was saying. So, I'm not just coming out of my mouth and saying these things, that kind of thing. If you're writing a story, okay, Amadioha. I want to put Amadioha in my story, but I don't know how I'm going to depict him. What does Amadioha look like? I have an Amadioha folder. You can pull and pick your inspiration from there. If you want to incorporate Insibidi, I have an Insibidi folder, so on and so forth. So all of that is available to patrons at any level, right? And then for the higher tier patrons, the premium and the IZIP patrons, we have an Odinani group chat. So the next group chat discussion we're having is actually going to be this Sunday, and the topic is going to be boundaries, the spirituality of boundaries, right? So setting boundaries, releasing boundaries, and then the question of where does a human being begin and end as far as spirituality goes? Where do I as a person begin and end? Right? What is me? Where do I end? That kind of thing. Just kind of exploring that idea. Might be a strange question for some, but that's the type of stuff we discuss in there. We have phenomenal conversations. So all of that is available. Oh yeah, and then the calendar. So the Odinani calendar, it has the moons and the days. So Eke Uria Afon, it's going to let you know what. In fact, let me check and see what we're doing today. Yep, I got an email. Hold on. So yeah, you're going to FYI live is definitely on. Chat is working on our end. Yeah, I'm sure. Question: do you think there's a line when it comes to have fun point? I'm thinking that things like Hotel Rwanda and Heart of Darkness, when I ask that question. Okay, great point. So this is what Hotel Rwanda does, right? Hotel Rwanda lets people know that this happened at its most like utilitarian, useful, whatever. It lets people know that this happened. It lets people know that this happened to human beings, right? And then if they're interested in learning more, there are sources for accuracy, right? Oh, it turns out that the guy did this instead of that. Turns out that that's not really what happened. It didn't play out that way, so on and so forth, right? There's so much politics that go into making a movie that you will probably never get a historically accurate movie. It's just not going to happen, right? That kind of thing. They're okay. We need to add some spice because this is what's hot now. So take this part out, add this part. Okay, we're not going to get sponsorship from these people if we have this, so we're going to cut that out. And da 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 da. Right? There was something about the Malcolm X movie that Spike Lee was making, and he had a scene where he was talking about how pork, why Muslims don't eat pork, right? And so for some reason they made him take it out. So to my knowledge, unless there's like a scene in there that I missed, there's no mention of the pork thing, which is a big thing if you know the history of that particular meat. And as it ties to Islam and slavery in the United States, there's an intimate relationship, right? But that whole thing gets left out. The whole thing gets left out because the politics. Oh, maybe the pork lobby said we don't want you putting this in the movie. I don't know what happened, right? Maybe the guy putting up the money was his nephew owned a damn, I don't know, boar's head or something, right? That kind of thing. So a movie is not the source of accuracy. A movie is a source of inspiration. A book is a source of inspiration. All these things are inspiration. And if a person is inspired enough to go further, they can go look for the real thing, right? But if the inspiration doesn't float around at all, you never get to go look at the real thing. So a lot of people who are researchers in Igbo culture, their spark was from Things Fall Apart. Things Fall Apart gave them this like, oh wow, this is interesting. And then you look in there, you find things like maybe okay, yeah, it is a work of fiction, so that didn't actually happen, and this is not how it panned out, and this and that, and oh, this like for example, like one of Achebe's blind spots, and I don't like to say this because it's like it's asinine, right? He wasn't trying. Wasn't his goal. I don't think he doesn't know these things. But when it comes to some of the concepts in like spirituality and cosmology, when you're reading, you remember that Achebe is a Christian. You're like, oh, that's not really that, but sure, whatever. Go ahead, that kind of thing. But if I was inspired enough by the book, I can go find the real thing. So yeah, go ahead and have fun. It's the inspiration thing. The inspiration is not going to happen if you, the creator, didn't have fun creating the thing, because the fun you had is carried in the moi that you have created, the spirit that you have created around the work, and you spread around. People have fun, and then all of a sudden they go look further into the thing, right? You can watch, and like a lot of people became interested in basketball. They don't want to admit it. A lot of a lot of the LeBron James Michael Jordan debate comes from the fact that a lot of people in the generation slightly younger than me were introduced to basketball by Space Jam, right? And so they think Michael Jordan is the guy from Space Jam. And they're like, there's no way anybody's better than that guy. He can extend his hand 40 feet. Now, they're not saying this with their mouth, like, this is not what they're saying, just whatever, but a lot of.
You're almost done.
Yes, I'm almost done. A lot of the mythos around Michael Jordan comes from a lot of things that were not never supposed to be accurate. Commercials, um, uh, NBA sales campaigns. Oh, this is this guy, yada yada, yada, and there. But then, if you're now inspired enough by Space Jam, you start watching actual basketball. You start watching actual basketball. You're still really into Michael Jordan. There's no reason not to be. You learn more about him, right? But a lot of people in the generation, slightly younger than me, slightly like 1 year and down, started watching basketball because of Space Jam. So all these people that are having these very passionate LeBron James, Michael Jordan debates, I have a theory that that they're talking about the guy from Space Jam, right? That kind of thing. A lot of people are inspired by highlight reels, right? You watch LeBron James do 3 million dunks, then you start watching actual basketball, and you can't not see this person as a regular player, right? Because you bought the thing, but it doesn't matter. Just do the fun thing, watch your Space Jam, watch the highlight reels, and if people are inspired enough, they'll go further, right? They'll go further. But most people are going to receive it at the level of entertainment and move on because it's just not their thing like that, right? So yeah, have fun. Don't be too caught up on like accuracy. You're not going to dislodge Igbo culture. writing your book. I know, you're probably not you specifically, Chimoge, but I know you're specifically, or I know that you guys are good authors, but you're not that good. You're not going to dislodge Somali culture, or writing the wrong thing or painting the wrong thing in your painting. You're not going to destroy a Bantu culture because you're not going to have that much of an impact. Somebody's going to brush across your thing. Oh, that's interesting. Then they'll see the real thing. Oh, that makes more sense. And then that's the end of that, right? Or whatever, that kind of thing. Game of Thrones, we'll use Game of Thrones for example, has made a lot of people start looking into early English history because it's based on early England, right? Or War of the Roses era England, the War of the Roses. So a lot of people are started looking into that, right? These are people who would have never looked at the War of the Roses, something that doesn't get talked about too often, if it wasn't for this particular work, right? So something like Hotel Rwanda. Hotel Rwanda, okay, for those who want to go further, you can go get the information. It's all there, right? But that movie helped most people in the world beyond Rwanda know that this thing happened and this thing happened to human beings, which is what the work is actually about. Now, whether his hotel was facing east or west, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, Chimoke, thanks for emailing that question, man. You're the man. Have one point, yeah, Rwanda, Heart of Darkness. When I asked a question, even Heart of Darkness, right? Heart of Darkness was, I've never read it, but according to Achebe, just this racist drivel, right? But that racist drivel created things fall apart, right? It didn't create it, but it inspired things fall apart. The anger at that racist drivel created things fall apart, right? And that's kind of how the creative space works. It's not really a place for truth. It can be enriched by truth because the actual world is consistently more interesting than things people make up, right? If you A lot of things that happen in real life, if you wrote about it, people wouldn't believe it. It'd be unbelievable, right? So reality can enrich a story, but a story is not a source of reality, right? That kind of thing. A story is not a source of reality, that type of thing. So yeah, just have fun, do whatever you want, and if it's ridiculous, people just won't buy it. That kind of thing. I think, yeah, that was the only email I got. The chat's off. I feel like I'm missing all the jokes. I don't know. I'm missing out on a lot of stuff. So, been a great conversation. Again, you can support the channel, patreon.com/the medicine shell. If you are interested in learning the Igbo language, I have launched an Igbo language school at gedu.me. And we are officially signing people up for the summer courses, which begin June 26th and end in September 24th. So we're signing people up right now for the summer courses. There are 12 seats per class. And people have already started coming in, and like people from the previous sessions are like advancing and things like that. So, I guess hurry up and get your seat if you're interested in learning this summer. This would be a great opportunity since it's summer to enroll any children or kids for the Kedu Kids program. We have a phenomenal teacher who's going to be teaching the kids. If you want your children to learn the language, nieces, nephews, anything like that. There's a survey there so you can see what level that I would personally recommend for you based off of what we think works. And yeah, and the students we have now are doing a phenomenal job. um all, like, literally all of them, not just saying this, they're all doing a phenomenal job. I'm trying to find a way to say, yo, it works without I'm the guy. I mean, it's my thing, so of course I'm going to say it in a nice way, but yo, this shit works, like people who I'm pretty sure did not hear the Igbo language prior to enrolling and made the brave lunge to go ahead and do it are like having conversations. I was talking uh, to my Igbo one class, and one of the things I was telling them was that I don't think you guys know how much you guys are speaking, like where you guys are at, because a lot of them feel like, oh, I'm just not there yet, or they're really striving to perfect things. It's like, no, dude, you're like really far. Like you can you can walk around and have a conversation in the middle of Onitsha Market if you wanted to, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's everything that I have available right now. The actually, like, the videos have been slow as of late. I've been in the process of moving. This is my alleged office. I've been in the process of moving. My family just landed last night. And so the stability is coming back, but they brought my laptops. I forgot my laptop when I was driving up here. They brought my laptop, so things are going to get back to normal rotation as far as me releasing my normal video essay style videos. That being said, you guys are phenomenal. Unu ga-adị, unu ga-eto ka ọ bụla unu tiri aka ọ ga-adị n'ụwa a, na ọ ga-adị n'eke n'orie n'afọ na nkwọ ise. You guys take care. Thanks for coming, guys.